the Bratislava Schools debating competition. I'm going to be your judge for the first round. I'm sorry that I will be the only one, but hopefully for the next debate you will have the chance to experience other judges. My colleague here will show you the time, but otherwise you can also have your own timekeeping. And if you have any questions, you can ask now. If you don't, I think that we can start a debate. And I would like to ask the first debater, speaker of the proposition team, Francisco, to open the debate.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Honorable Opposition Team, adjudicators and others. Let me remind a motion to start this debate that this House will require the pharmaceutical companies to sell all drugs for life-threatening conditions at production cost price in developing countries. Before I start the debate, let me give you some definitions. We as proposition team will define pharmaceutical companies as a business enterprise that produces and sells medical drugs. Drugs for life-threatening conditions we define as those medicines that if you don't consume, the risk of dying it increased dramatically. Production cost price is a cost incurred by business when manufacturing a good or produces a service that combines raw material and labor. Developing countries is a nation with a lower standard of living. Under developed countries, industries based on low human development, like life expectancy, education. No, please. What's the problem nowadays? That people have to have to pay these drugs for life-threatening conditions to live because they are in risk of dying. So what they have to do to reach it? They have to reduce their standard of living, or they have to die, or they have to lose their resources. No, please. So the issue is whether reducing the production cost price in drugs for life-threatening conditions will be benefit for people, companies, and government or not. We, as proposition team, we have to prove that selling pharmaceutical drugs for life-threatening conditions at production cost price is better for people. That companies do not lose money and they may win, and that is better for the government.
So,
yes.
Even in developed countries, the low-income group cannot afford these life-saving drugs. So would you force companies to sell the life-saving drugs at production cost price in developed countries as well?
Can you repeat the question, please?
In developed countries, the poor people cannot afford these drugs. So would you force companies to sell it at production cost price in developed countries as well?
Okay. Now we are talking about developing countries, but my second speaker will continue with this answer, with this question then. Okay, let me pass to the model of this debate. What happens here? In the United Nations, we have a special organism called the International Labour Organization, the ILO, that states a policy of the corporate social responsibility that state that active contribution in order to achieve a social, economic, and environmental improvement by the companies. What we will do here? This organization exists. What we will do here? Pass a law for the companies, for the pharmaceutical companies to sell all these drugs for life-threatening conditions to give an active contribution in order to achieve a social and economical improvement by the company. Okay, how we will control that? How to control by the role of government is to inform people that these companies doesn't sell these drugs at the price they want by giving online advertisement, street advertisements, and also in receipt and hospital, in hospitals. So here people will know what's the real production cost price, and they will not be fraud. Okay. Before I start with my argument, I will start with my argument that is why it's benefit for people. Well, as we said in the problem, these people is reducing their standard of living by trying to achieve to pay these drugs. So,
For information,
yes.
sir, then would you also allow small retailers and the hospitals to also sell life-saving drugs at production cost price?
Again, please.
Would you also force small retailers and hospitals to also sell these life-saving drugs at production cost price?
We are saying in the motion that we are trying to pharmaceutical companies to sell these drugs, not the hospitals. We are saying that the hospitals are going to inform the price of these drugs for life-threatening conditions. So let me keep on. What I am saying, people is reducing their standard of living, so or they are dying. What are we want to do? We are trying to lower this production cost price of the drugs of life-threatening conditions, so they can achieve them, so they can pay, they can achieve them, they can reach their price, and they are not trying to reduce the standard of living by they can afford to buy other things, not only to put all the money for these drugs. That they need other necessities. So, and also the people that die are going to achieve, are going to reach to pay this. Okay, well, I'll give you an example. In the production cost price of the drugs is by the mark of $12. So, and what are the pharmaceutical companies, and what price are the pharmaceutical companies? What price are the drugs, are the pharmaceutical companies selling? They are selling at, with extraordinary earnings that that my second speaker will amplify. Then my second the extraordinary earnings, but with the extraordinary earnings, are selling it at the price at the price of $300. So we are trying to sell it at this production cost price that is lower, so people can achieve. Okay, now I will say why is benefit for the country. Okay, in the country, as I have said, the standard of living increased by selling these drugs at the production cost price because people can afford to pay. Why is better that there will be a better standard of living? People will invest in their country. So what happens if we invest in our country? Because we have increase in standard of living. We have more production. If we have more production, we have more consume. So what we are having, people investing in countries paying taxes, and if we have more consume and more production, companies also will pay more taxes. So why this is why better for the country. So by my two arguments, I have looked at why it's better for people to achieve to these drugs, and why the government also wins. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to call upon the first speaker of the opposition bill.
Ladies and gentlemen, when there are huge problems in developing nations, problems that make people die, problems that cause them to suffer, the only solution isn't to chase away the only hope for these people to survive and chase away the pharmaceutical companies. The solution here lies with opposition. Why? Because we support the status quo, where pharmaceutical companies are now free to sell the drugs for their life-threatening conditions at appropriate prices. we already say that companies have a natural incentive to lower the prices through price discrimination methods, whereby the companies decrease the prices purposely in order to make it more affordable for the consumers so that they can make a maximum revenue as a result. If it's too high, they won't earn money, and therefore they already have an incentive to lower the amount of the prices. Even if we want companies to have social welfare, we have to acknowledge that these companies are held accountable to the many shareholders in them. And as a result, they are forced to make profits. They need to make profits because they are accountable to these people and they need to sustain themselves as a result. We give you the example of how Swiss company Roche has created new brands and packaging for the lower priced drugs in India and Egypt. So we can see already, when companies do as they deem fit, they are better able to help the people as compared to when they're forced to uphold unsustainable economic policy from the government. Today, we're going to argue that our side saves more lives and best incentivizes research and development for the control of life-threatening conditions. But before we move on to my constructive case for today, let's deal with a few points of rebuttal. Firstly, on their policy. So they've told us today that their production cost is going to include the developmental cost of the drug. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to acknowledge one thing. When we produce a drug, the developmental cost goes from hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars. So what this means is that the prices of the drugs under their model is going to be extremely high still. So what happens then is that they're not able to make any change on the people on the ground whatsoever, because still under their regime, the people can't afford it. No, thank you, madam. Then they've told us that they're going to pass a law, and if the company, and they haven't told us what's going to happen to the company if they break it. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's no possible punishment for the company, then they can't uphold their policy, because now companies are still going to sell their prices of the drugs at whatever prices they deem fit. They haven't proved an effective deterrent for this. But let's talk about their first substantive on how it's beneficiary for the people. They told us that when you spend money for drugs, your standard of living drops. But ladies and gentlemen, at least they have a hope for survival when under our regime. Then we asked them a POI about small retailers, right? And they haven't gotten back to us. Ladies and gentlemen, when the prices go down, when big companies, pharmaceutical companies, are forced to reduce their prices, small retailers are just going to reduce their prices as well. And because they're so small and they don't have a variety of drugs to sell, what this means is that all your smaller pharmaceutical companies under their model are also going to die out as well. This just cuts off accessibility of medicines to the people on the ground. It completely kills off any small pharmaceutical companies there, and the people can't survive as a result there. So then they've told us that people spend too much money towards drugs, and this is bad. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you an example here. In 1996, antiretroviral drugs, the prices were $15,000. When companies realized that this price was too high, and they realized that nobody was buying it because of this, they reduced their prices to just $114. And this shows you the immense amount of power that these companies have when they can reduce prices for this reason. So what's happening under our model is that the problem is already being solved. All their side does is chase away the companies, and I'm going to be proving to you in my constructive. Before that, let's deal with the second point on how it benefits the country. They told us about how now that citizens can afford to pay, more people are going to somehow invest in the country. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, they haven't told us how there's a relation between how you're affording to pay for your drugs and people investing in your country. But even if we assume that there is a logical link, more people invest under our model. Why? Because when we allow pharmaceutical companies to come into our countries and develop and make business, more and more of them come to our countries, more MNCs come to our countries. When more companies come to our countries, more investments are in our countries, and as a result, the investment in the countries under our model is so much higher than theirs, because companies are going to be so afraid to come to their country under their model completely. But let's just move on to my constructive methods. I'm going to talk about how pharmaceutical companies are simply going to stop selling life-saving drugs, and about how companies are going to stop investing in drugs for developing nations. My second speaker is going to talk to you about what enhances the medical research and development and how it's a violation of rights and free enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, as a team, we are going to prove to you that when nations profit companies, the companies profit the people. So let's move on to my first substantive. On their side, let's see what happens. Because companies have to sell all their life-saving drugs at a cost price, they gain absolutely no profit from the sale of life-saving drugs. They're forced to run on a loss and therefore can't sustain themselves anymore.
On that point,
Yes, ma'am.
let me tell you that the more money that the pharmacy companies have is because of generic products, not because of life-threatening condition products.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is just factually untrue. What happens in the developing world? You see a lot of cases like malaria. 91% of the world's malaria cases come from these countries. As a result, when pharmaceutical companies set up in these countries, they make most of their business from the sale of the life-saving drugs. Not your generic medicines, not from your common flu. They make it from the drugs that really make an impact on the people. Drugs for malaria, drugs for cholera. That's just factually untrue on their side. But worse still for companies, back to my substantive. It's worse for companies which specialize in these life-saving drugs, as we've already acknowledged, and have no alternative products to sell at a profit. Without the profit, in order to keep themselves afloat, they may even shut down all operations in the country altogether because they face unnecessary penalties. As a result, the significance of this is that people in developing nations will have completely no access to life-saving drugs at all. They're left to suffer with no hope for a cure, ladies and gentlemen. This just forces them to sell, thus forcing companies to sell life-saving drugs at a cost price. This results in them stopping to sell the product and results to more harm to the people down there. Let's do a comparative. Under our side, we at least ensure that the companies have sufficient revenue to sustain themselves, so they're able to continue selling life-saving drugs in the developing world, and people suffering from these diseases in the developing world can at least have a hope for recovery and a hope for a cure. We'll give you the example. When the NHS in the UK required prices of drugs to drop, pharmaceutical companies Novartis and Roche recognized it would hinder their ability to sustain themselves and even threaten to pull out the country, thereby threatening a lot of people. Another example. When Argentina announced that it was going to introduce a new law in December 2015, where companies were banned from gaining large amounts of profit, local companies stopped their production tremendously just to survive. This resulted in consumers smuggling a lot of drugs from Paraguay and from Brazil for extremely high prices, harming the consumers completely. Let's move on briefly to my second substantive. So when the companies are forced to sell the life-saving drugs at a cost price, they realize that investing in these drugs, largely consumed and needed by the populace in the developing countries, is hugely disadvantageous to them because they can only gain a marginal gain. So companies are not going to see any more benefits of staying in these countries and are going to start concentrating and refocusing their resources in the first world diseases instead of the third world diseases. So they're slowly going to stop manufacturing, slowly going to stop selling these drugs in the developing nations themselves, ladies and gentlemen. Eventually, because they can't earn money from it, they're going to completely shut down the sectors within these nations themselves. So people in the developing nations under their model have absolutely no chance of getting access to the drugs that they need. And the diseases in the developing nations continue to exist and continue to pass on in the communities, progressively making it harder to solve these diseases from society, thereby making even more people suffer on their side. So because when nations profit the companies, companies profit the people, I'm very, very proud to oppose.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the honorable opposition. This House will require pharmaceutical companies to sell all drugs for life-threatening condition, at productive cost, in developing countries. First of all, to define, I think the honorable opposition didn't get as well as we did as we presented our model. They said, as we presented our model, this organization, the ILO, will pass a law so as the pharmaceutical companies, so as the government, lets to know the people what the cost prices was, not to oblige pharmaceutical companies to do it so. So we are obliged, in this way, we are motivating pharmaceutical companies to do it so, but we are not obliging them. We are obliging them to tell the truth, to tell what the productive cost is, and to tell how it really costs to do that product. Moving forward, the first speaker here said, they say how we are motivating companies to decrease the. They say that the companies are motivated are motivated by their own to decrease the prices. But let me tell you that this is not happening nowadays. And let's give you one example, but clear example with numbers as to make it more clear. We have a medicine called carbotalino of cancer, that is for cancer of many cancer. One of cancer is for head cancers. That cost per action, as my first speaker clearly said, was thank you. And as my first speaker clearly said, was $12.79, and at the pharmaceutical cost, at the people that buy this product buy it for more for more than $2,086. So there we have how the pharmaceutical prices is not the same as pharmaceutical cost. And no, dear first speaker, the companies are not motivated by their own. Then they also said that production cost $1 million, and all that beautiful explanation they gave us of million and billion of dollars thus the production cost is about. But yes, if we have this production cost that is so high, that is so high, we are going to let the pharmaceutical companies to put it even more higher, so as the people not to afford them. A question I would like the honorable opposition asked me then. Then they also said that pharmaceutical companies will die, that will have no reason of existing, of sustaining themselves, because they are going to lose money. But in my arguments, I'm going to explain you how this is not going to happen and how companies will even earn something. Then they also said that they want us to explain the benefits of a company to stay in these countries. Passing to our arguments and to answer. Let me finish and to answer some of the honorable opposition. Okay. Some of the opposition points. As my first speaker said and clearly explained, it is better for people because we are saving the lives. And after starting my second argument about companies and governments, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about an inelastic demand, and demand that medicines, products that people will need to consume, yes or yes. We're not saying, oh yes, I'm going to consume because I'm going to feel better. That person needs yes or yes. So taking this in clear, we are going to talk about companies. Yes, before you continue.
Pharmaceutical companies like Roche are helping governments in developing countries to improve the healthcare system and healthcare technology. When your policy forces them to sell their drugs at production cost price, these companies think that they fulfill their obligation and thus leave completely.
Okay, I get your point. I'm going to prove you that this is not going to happen after all in other countries. That was an example that I don't think it's going on the debate. So, why is better for the company, as I was saying before? First of all, the company is not going to lose money at all. What is the company going to do? It's not going to earn money. That's another thing. The company is not going to lose. It's going not to earn. Thank you. Why? Because we are taking out the earning price, the earning cost. So the pharmaceutical is not going to lose money. Just it's not going to earn a little bit of the life-threatening condition drugs. But as I said before, the other opposition denied me and I'm going to repeat you. Yes, the pharmaceutical companies, the majority earning of the pharmaceutical companies are the generic products. Let me explain you why. We have Mr. Bayer, we have the company Bayer that sells a lot of bad aspirins, a lot of ibuprofen, a lot of generic drugs, medicines that are sold per day, more than that people consume each day, that are sold each day. And they also sell generic pharmaceutical, they also sell life-threatening condition products and drugs. But the major earning is on the generics on the generic medicines. Then, as I was saying, they will not lose money. Another main, yes.
Many of the companies in developing countries make most of their profits from life-saving drugs such as those to treat malaria. Therefore, if we prevent them from making these profits, they will leave the country.
Can you repeat, please?
Most of the profits that these companies make in developing countries is from life-saving drugs, such as those drugs to treat malaria.
Okay, I get your point, but in a country that people cannot afford these medicines, how it's going to earn, how the main earning will be in that drugs. If I cannot afford the life-threatening condition drugs, because as I explained before, the earning cost is much more higher than we expected. As I explained before, how the people is going to afford it. So in that way, and let me explain you something. The company is not only in one country. The company is in many countries. Then, as I was saying, I think that in fact, the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, earn in these countries is publicity, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, and this is an important tool of pharmaceuticals of each company. Publicity. Why? Because if I am in a developing country and I need to save my life, I'm going to buy the cheapest one that is at the cost of price. And then, when I need to buy another product of whatever you want, I'm going to buy the one who saved my life, the brand who saved my life. So that is publicity. That mouth to mouth is publicity. And if you may say, okay, there are big companies and they don't need publicity anymore. Look at Coca-Cola, we have publicity everywhere, and it's really huge. Then, as my first speaker already clearly said, it's for governments, it will increase the standard of living, and so as we prove, it will be better for society, for the people, and for the company. Thank you very much.
For a speech. Now, the second speaker of the opposition team, Esther, should.
So before I move on to hitting the substantive that they brought out to us in the second speaker, let me first hit some of the policy attacks again, because they've never come back to us on it, although my first speaker has already pushed them for an answer. Because we asked them, in your policy, when you set a law in the ILO, and this law is passed out, what happens if companies don't abide by it? And my first speaker has already shown you that because you don't have a punishment, or because the companies won't have something of a punishment to face up to, or consequence if they do not abide by their policies, it'd be much easier for these companies to fall back on the usual prices, continue selling them at high prices, because regulations or punishments isn't there, therefore not deterring them to do what they are usually doing and what they want to stop. Therefore, their policy just doesn't work in the first place, and they never come back to us on it. So I push the third speaker to come back to us on that point. So on the second speaker's substantive on publicity, mainly she came up to tell us that publicity is key for them to have a good image, and thus because the good image is so key to them, they will stay. We say that in these scenarios, in these profit-oriented pharmaceutical companies, profits trump good image. So if they're in the first place unable to fund themselves, the research and development and the production of their drugs, they won't even be able to stay in the countries. Because they're not earning a profit, because yes, maybe they might just be breaking even, because they can't afford, because they're not gaining profits, they won't stay in the countries itself. Therefore, publicity isn't a strong enough condition for them to stay in these countries. Therefore, we say that because of the systematic ideas of the companies itself, because they're only able to run itself when they're able to gain profits, we say that profits are so much more important to them than in their scenario of publicity. Therefore, these companies will still leave in their scenarios. And then going back to their points on their rebuttals against my first speaker's substantive on how pharmaceutical companies will stop selling the drugs and entering these developing countries in the first place. and they told us that pharmaceutical companies will not lose money. Instead, they will get profits because they're still able to sell generic products in the country, which are the major earning sectors of these companies. And we're told this is completely not true, because in the cases of these companies in developing countries, the key things that people are going to buy are life-saving drugs. These things are what people are going to purchase, not generic drugs like Panadol or cosmetic drugs like they told us. No, thank you, sir. Therefore, because of the very fact that they're not purchasing these generic products, they're not going to be earning any more profits. Therefore, they will basically leave the country. Therefore, the pharmaceuticals will not lose money, but yes, they won't gain any profits because of the very fact that these generic products are not key factors to their earning or their profit making in these countries. Instead, life-saving drugs are the key factors. Therefore, when you push them to sell it at production cost price, they cannot gain any profits, and therefore they won't have any incentive in the first place to stay in the countries. And also after that, they told us that the people will need it because it's necessary, and therefore they will find a way to get it. Anyhow, we tell you that they've never actually come back to us on that point, and never really elaborated how that would really occur, because we showed you in the first place that even if it was really necessary to these people, and really key to these people, in the first place, these companies won't exist in the countries to sell it to them, because they don't have the incentive to stay. And the rebuttal against the second point on how companies will stop investing in drugs specifically for developing nations, they basically told us again that the companies will have the incentives, but they've never really explained to us why. But before I move on, yes ma'am.
So don't you think that the pharmaceutical companies can take advantage of this necessity?
Ma'am, we believe that they have an incentive to lower the costs and offer it to a price so that people will be able to afford it. Why? Because of the very place that when they enter these countries, they want to maximize revenue. They want to ensure that most people will be able to afford it. Only then will they gain some sort of profit. Therefore, they will be incentivized to sell it at lower prices, and therefore they won't be taking advantage of the situation. They will be ensuring they get maximum revenue. So on the rebuttal on our second point, like I was saying, on how companies will stop investing in drugs altogether and the research and development, they've never really come back to us on that point, completely dropped in the speaker, because our speaker has already shown you the impacts of how these these medications for drugs that only exist in developing countries won't be invested in anymore because of the very aspect that they don't have the incentive to come in because they won't gain profits because of their policy. So moving on to my substantives for today, on how harming medical research and development occurs on their side. Now, when we sell at cost price, companies will barely break even and will have just enough revenue to pay for their expenses. This leaves no additional revenue which can be plowed back into research and development. With reduced profits, this also reduces investments into these firms. Pharmaceutical products require great amounts of resources on the company's part, and they have to invest in extensive research and development, from clinical research to trials. Also, for every drug that is brought into the market, 9 drugs fail the trials somewhere along the long developmental process. Therefore, the full cost of bringing a new drug often ranges from a few $100 million to billions of dollars. The effect is that companies will now have to shut down their research and development, as they don't have the sale revenues or the investments to fund themselves anymore. This means that the company will only continue manufacturing the same drugs without having the ability to create improved versions of the cures and vaccines. So why is it so bad? Because these life-threatening conditions which currently don't have cures or vaccines, this forces patients to have to keep purchasing currently inadequate drugs. Even worse, many life-threatening diseases are bacteria and viruses that are already mutating and growing resistant to existing drugs. Propositions policy will destroy the ability of drug companies to develop now new medicine to cope with these mutations, dooming so many more people to die in their scenario. So moving on to the explanation of the example. Now, millions die from HIV/AIDS every year, and pharmaceutical companies such as Pfizer have already invested $5 billion to develop a viable cure in the hopes that they will recoup the cost when they sell the drug for profit. But with propositions policy, when they cut this down to selling at production cost price, this will reverse all their efforts and ensure millions continue dying, because they remove the incentive for companies to even invest in developing these drugs in the first place. So moving on to the second point on the violation of rights and free enterprises. Now, when forced to sell at cost price, the company will no longer be able to control their own prices. In fact, the state will be determining the prices for the company. This is a massive violation of the property rights of the company. The state is essentially controlling the sale of property which they do not own. This is tantamount to nationalizing a private sector company and controlling its activities. Not only is that unjust and unfair in principle, this disincentivizes and deters other companies to come into the developing nations, which already totally combats their point on how companies will be incentivized incentivized to come in. This is already made worse by the fact that these negative factors already occur in developing nations, such as corrupt governments and low quality infrastructure. Therefore, the companies come in and there's no more increase in the number of people. There'll be a decrease in the number of jobs that are offered to the people. The people are now the ultimate victims of their policy. Furthermore, this sets precedents for the governments to set prices in other goods and services using public good as a justification. And this further stifles free enterprise in their scenario and hurts the economy. We saw this in Cuba when Fidel Castro nationalized all private assets of foreign firms, claiming that they were evil, therefore killing and hurting the people on the ground in Cuban firms. And we saw this in India when they forcefully revoked patents on drugs from companies such as Pfizer and Roche, and this deterred other companies from the EU from investing in the country, with investment dropping by $30 billion as companies feared that their intellectual property laws would be undermined with their scenario. Therefore, because profitable companies will in turn profit the people, we want to profit everyone in society, and therefore, because we can do so, we are the side that really protects society.
Nowadays, ladies and gentlemen, people are dying of illnesses in developing countries for life-threatening conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, in developing countries, there are lots of people that are dying because they cannot afford these medicines, these drugs that can save their lives. So that's the problem that brings us here, that there are people that can afford and are dying in developing countries. So to analyze the debate, I divided the debate in 3 points of clash. The first one, which is the objective. The second one, which is the main earnings of the companies. And the third one, which is the better solution. Starting with the first point of clash, which is the objective. On the one hand, we have a proposition whose objective is saving people. It's saving life in developing countries, ladies and gentlemen. On the other side, it seems that we have an opposition team that prefer giving money to these enterprises that have a lot of money, giving money to a billionaire businessman, giving money to the businessman of Bayer, for example, or for fires, and not saving people. So as I have said, the problem is that people are dying, so the objective is to save these people. Therefore, both teams have to prove which way is better to save these people. On the one hand, we have a proposition that provides this solution, and on the other side, we find an opposition team that wants to benefit enterprises instead of these people that are dying, ladies and gentlemen. But you disagree, madam. Yes, accept it.
Yes, we say that on your side, you won't even be able to save lives because of the very fact that you've disincentivized companies to come into your
I will reach
country
that point.
because they don't have
I got your point. I will reach it later on my second point of class. I'm just now in the first one. I'm saying which is the objective. Clearly, we have both. We have one team that wants to defend, which wants to save, who wants to give life for people, and on the other side, an opposition team that wants to benefit enterprises. Well, that's having clarified the first point of class, which is the objective. I will lead to the second point of class, that is, which is the main earning of these companies. And here is when the second speaker point came. On this side, we have a proposition team that do believe, with facts, have proved you through all the debate, that the main earning on the companies is on the over-the-counter drugs, on these generic drugs that they sell millions of them. Therefore, by taking out the extraordinary earnings of just one little part of the drugs that are the life for drugs for life-threatening condition, the company won't lose money, and this little money that stop gaining, they will earning anyway in publicity, as we have shown. Therefore, with this publicity that, as my second speaker clearly explained, Bayer have saved my life, or this other company have saved my life, people will choose Bayer. So therefore, they will earn more. They will have more earnings on these over-the-counter drugs of these generic drugs that are the drugs where they earn more. On the other side, we have a on the other side, the opposition team tell us that the main earning was the life-threatening condition, and it's clearly not. Therefore, we prove you that the companies won't lose money. They just stop earning some money that they will at the end earn from other side, that is publicity, so therefore they will sell more. Even also they will sell more because there will be more people that they have saved, so more people means more selling. So companies will still sell, denied. Third point of clash, and the most important is which is the better solution. Having knew that the problem is that people are dying, which is the better solution to solve this problem, to stop people from dying? We as proposition to propose a real strong case to stop people from dying. That is, say, making this product, this drug for life-threatening condition, less cost, so therefore people would be able to buy it. So there were people that nowadays are dying. The people that hold on, the people that nowadays are dying won't die anymore and will be able to pay these drugs. And there are people that could reach these drugs, but sacrificing the standard of living, they won't anymore, and they will have a better standard of living. Did I mean, ma'am?
As you said how pharmaceutical companies need profits and they want profits, and you said that they'll be able to get it from other measures, we tell you that if this is really so minimal as you've said so yourself, won't they be more incentivized to put money into cosmetic drugs only in developed nations instead of helping developing nations?
Of course it will. Of course it will invest on developed nations, but today we're debating in developing countries, that is where people will are dying, so therefore the companies will invest on developed countries as well. But in developing countries, we want and we believe that the main objective is saving people. And if by saving people we have to perjudicate a millionaire enterprise, we don't care, because with one single life we have saved, we will have get our objective not denied. Therefore, we have proved you that we will motivate these companies to be here because they will gain earnings from their companies and the publicity, and therefore the people that used to die won't anymore, and the people that can't afford these drugs but sacrifice the standard of living won't anymore sacrifice the standard of living. The country will be benefited because there will be more people alive. There will be other countries, other companies that invest in this country. These people that are alive will consume. The people that have a better standard of living now can buy more things. Therefore, there will be no denying. There will be more production. Therefore, there will be more consumption. Therefore, more protection. And therefore, the country will grow. Besides, the country will step by step stop being a developing countries. Hold on, stop being a developing countries because the standard of living of their people will grow. But you disagree.
When pharmaceutical companies under your side have absolutely no incentive to carry out the research and development of these drugs, then how does your side prevent diseases in the future?
I don't understand anything of your point because you speak too fast and you're stealing my time. So I will sum up the 3 points of clashes. First of all, which is the objective? We have made clear that the objective of the proposition is much better than the opposition because we want to help people, and on the other side they want to help an enterprise, a million enterprise. We prove you that the main earnings of companies are out of the country drugs and not the extraordinary earnings of the life-threatening condition, and even if there were the extraordinary earnings, they will be replaced by publicity. And the better solution is us. Either that the opposition solution that was no solution, they will let just people die. That's why the opposition team have won this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I would call on Udbra.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
The problem with side proposition was that they came up here and said that we are the ones that are saving lives, that we are the ones that are protecting the people on the ground. But what they fail to recognize is that they're not really saving lives when they implement these economically misguided policies, forcing pharmaceutical companies not to make profits. Because they thought that they can simply tell pharmaceutical companies that no, you cannot make profits, and they thought everything will be okay. Ignoring every single line of analysis that we told you, telling you things like how pharmaceutical companies are profit motivated because they are accountable to their shareholders and investors. If they're not making profits, the shareholders and investors will put pressure on these companies to leave the country. And that is why side opposition is better, because we recognize from the start of the debate that if you do not allow these pharmaceutical companies to make profits, if you do not help them to subsidize these drugs, then they will leave the country and more lives will be lost. Bearing this framework in mind, two clashes in the House today. Which side saves more lives? Which side is best for the economic growth of developing countries? And here they told, and the second question first, where they told us in the second substantive that there will be more investment in the country under their policy. But my first speaker already told you there is no link between a pharmaceutical company being forced to sell the life-saving drugs at a production cost price and more investment in a country. But even in that best case scenario, we tell you what will happen. Because as I showed you to our substantives, under their policy, pharmaceutical companies will simply leave the country or they'll simply stop engaging in research and development. And what this means is that the more people in these developing countries will die. And this means that under their side, lesser MNCs will invest in the country. Because if so many people are dying, they see no incentive to invest in these countries and actually sell products to the people. On the comparative, we told you in our fourth substantive, this whole idea that if governments implement anti-capitalist policies, where they force the company to sell these products at production cost price, then what will happen is that other companies will get very, very scared. No thank you. They'll get scared. They'll say, oh look, the government is now throttling my company. I will not invest in the country. Because they're scared that if I invest in the country, now they'll do the same thing to me and prevent me from making profits. Let me give you a concrete example. In Argentina, when President Cristina Kirchner nationalized the energy firm YPF, let other investors from all around the world were scared to invest in Argentina because they thought, if I invest in Argentina, the same thing will happen to me. And this is a substantive that they never tackled right from the start of the debate. Then let's look at the second clash in today's debate. Which side is actually saving more lives? And here they told us, right from their first substantive, this whole idea that people are dying and standard of living is decreasing. My first speaker already hit this point. Because he told you, companies, I'll take it in a moment, companies have a natural incentive to lower prices of drugs in developing countries. Why? Because if no one can afford their drugs, they're not making profits. Therefore, they'll lower the price of the drugs so that more people can afford it, and therefore they'll make profits. Yes, sir.
So what would be your solution? Still let people still die?
No, sir, we're not telling you that. We're telling you that companies have a natural incentive to lower the price of the drugs, make it affordable, more people can afford these drugs, and therefore the companies can make profits and more lives are saved on the ground. On the comparative, what's going to happen on their side is that companies are going to leave and therefore no lives will be saved at all under their paradigm. Now let me add to this by giving you further lines of analysis. We can also tell you that NGOs and international organizations also work with these pharmaceutical companies to subsidize the drugs and make it affordable. Let me give you a concrete example. The Clinton Foundation, set up by Bill and Hillary Clinton, works with the UN and they established an organization known as UNAID. what this Unit 8 does is that they subsidize drugs for HIV and AIDS in developing countries, ensuring that it's affordable, and therefore our side is better. But on the comparative, what we told you, that under their policy, companies will simply stop selling life-saving drugs at all. And what is their response to this? Companies still earn a lot of money from generic medicines. But this is simply not true, right? Because in developing countries, companies simply do not earn enough profits from generic medicines, such as beauty care products or baby care products. Why? Because there's a lack of demand from such countries. Why is there a lack of demand? Because so many of the healthcare standards are so poor. People are struggling to survive. So how will they be buying beauty care products and baby care products when they're struggling to survive? On the comparative, what is happening is that they're making most of their profits in developing countries from life-saving drugs like such as things such as to treat malaria or HIV or cancer. Under their side, when they prevent companies from making these profits from life-saving drugs, they'll say, okay, I'll stop selling these life-saving drugs in the country anyways, and more lives will be lost under their side. Then they also told us in their second response that, oh, now we're giving good publicity to these companies. My second speaker already killed this point, because she told you that companies are accountable to their shareholders and investors. If they're not making profits, then the shareholders will put pressure on the companies to simply stop selling these drugs and divert these resources towards other areas where they can actually make profits and where they can actually increase shareholder value. And then they also told us this whole idea that, oh, okay, brand loyalty and this drug saved my life, so I'll buy more drugs from these companies. But this is a concession, right? Because if companies recognize that publicity is so important, then why would they make the drug so unaffordable in the first place, right? This actually works into our case. Because if they recognize that publicity is very important, that brand loyalty is very important, then as I've already shown you, they have a natural incentive to lower the price of the drug and ensure it's affordable to more people so they can gain more publicity, so they can gain more brand loyalty. This is a concession from their side of the house. Then we also told you in our third substantive, this whole idea that companies will not have enough money to do research and development. Again, a substantive that they completely dropped. Let me tell you why this is so important. Because some companies such as Novartis and Gilead specialize in producing and selling life-saving drugs. For example, Gilead specializes in producing drugs to treat hepatitis C. Under their policy, when they prevent these companies from making profits from such drugs, then they will say, why should I bother engaging in research and development? I do not have the resources to engage in research and development. And if they do not have the resources to engage in research and development, they will not produce new drugs. If they're not producing new drugs, more lives will be lost every single day because they say, I will not improve on my drugs, I will not engage in research and development simply because I'm not making enough profits. Then we also told you in our second substantive that companies do not have any incentive to engage in research and development. And this is different, right? Because some companies, we agree with them, specialize in a whole range of products, but yet they'll have no incentive to engage in research and development. Their only response to this was, oh, because they're not losing money, it is okay. But I've already told you, pharmaceutical companies do not want to simply break even. They want to make profits. Why? Because they are accountable to shareholders and also because they're scared that if I'm not making enough profits, I cannot expand, and then if I cannot expand, I'll be overtaken by my competitors in the same industry. And therefore, pharmaceutical companies will simply not put any money or simply not put any effort into engaging in the research and development of life-saving drugs if they cannot make any profits from these life-saving drugs. And this is important, right? Because 95% of all malaria cases originate in developing countries. 90% of all HIV/AIDS cases originate in developing countries. So if you're not making any money from the 90% of cases, then they have no incentive to engage in research and development, because if they're not making profits, they will get overtaken by their competitors and their shareholders will put pressure on them. So under their side, for diseases such as Ebola and other new diseases that are coming up right now in the world today, companies will not engage in research and development anymore because they cannot make profits, and millions of people will continue dying under their policy. And because we believe that we save more lives and we are best for the economic growth of developing countries, I'm very proud to oppose the motion.
Thank you very much for your speech. And now we're moving to the part of the policy government reply speeches. And the first speech goes from the side of the opposition.
today were unfounded because of the very aspect that all of them were made on the assumption of our points and what we really stood for. They never really understood what we were going for. When we said that we would profit the companies, we continued it by saying because only then will the companies be able to profit the people, thus saving more lives. But instead, they completely misrepresented us in their substantive and rebuttals and formed us the side that doesn't really care about the people, but cares more about pushing the companies up. But that really wasn't what we were pushing for on our side, and we continued to push for that explanation on our side, although they never really came back to us on it. So today we have two main clashes. Firstly, on which side saves more lives, and secondly, on which side really spurs research and development in the medical field. So on the first point, on which side saves more lives. Now, we told you in our speeches, continuously all throughout three speakers, that we incentivize them to stay in the first place because we give them the means to profit themselves, and secondly, we incentivize more companies to come in because we don't violate the rights of free enterprises on our side. Whereas on their side, they never came back to us on it, instead only telling us that they will be incentivized to stay because they will sell other generic products to the public, and therefore that will give them a profit, although our side completely characterized it for you about how when they enter developing countries, these developing countries' main purchasing power goes into life-saving drugs. They don't want to purchase generic products that they're talking about. There is no market for that, and therefore, because of that very aspect, because they still don't gain a profit, and they're putting so much money into these life-saving drugs, but they're not getting a return for it, they won't have the incentive to stay, because we already characterized for you the mindset of these pharmaceutical companies. They are profit-driven and profit-oriented. Therefore, if they do not gain a profit, and even if they break even, they won't have the incentive to stay because it would make more sense to them to go into developed countries, continue only investing in those areas, instead of going back to developing countries when they know that they won't even get a profit in that aspect. They told us that the standard of living would increase because more companies would be incentivized to come in, never showing us the link and never showing us how that really would happen when the standard of living rises, and how companies will be more incentivized to come in. And on our side, we rebutted that for you, telling you that companies won't be incentivized in the first place because you offer them a loss or a stalemate. You don't offer them a profit, which is what these companies and pharmaceutical companies really want. They never contented us on the characterizations of it, and they never really rebutted us on that aspect. And that's why we tell you that we are able to save more lives, because we continue letting more companies stay and incentivizing other companies to come in. Which brings me on nicely to my second point, on who continues spurring the research and development of the country. This never really was hit by their side, although we showed you that this was really one of the main aspects of making these companies stay in the countries and save more lives. We told you that we don't violate the companies' rights, we give them enough funds to spur themselves, therefore continuing research and development, continue the innovation of more drugs to combat new mutations and the new diseases that will rise on our side and on their side. And we showed you that the competition still remains in the countries because there's a market for these people, because they will be incentivized to come in, because they will lower the prices to hit a large group of people so that more people will buy, therefore gaining more profits, but at the same time still being incentivized to come in to profit themselves. Whereas on their side, they wouldn't even offer them a profit because they are putting governmental laws on these people where they are unable to control their own funds, control their own pricing of medication, and therefore harming themselves and these companies. Therefore, on who really continues spurring the research and development, it's really on our side when we incentivize these people to stay, more companies to come in, continuing research and development for these new diseases, and in the very aspect, we save more lives. And therefore, when nations profit the companies are able to profit the people, and therefore, we save more lives.
Thank you very much for your speech. And now the last speech of this debate from the side of the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have here an opposition team that didn't prove us, and that prove us that people would not die, but not giving another solution. We here, as a proposition, providing the solution from stop the death of people. Then we talk about the motivation of the people of the company, pharmaceutical companies, to stay in the country because of the publicity, because of the publicity, and because of the not loss of money. While in their side of the the team, they say that they are motivated to leave, but they don't say, but they didn't explain us why. Then, other point, we talk about publicity as a main source of pharmaceutical companies, while on the other side, they said that it have at least that it have no sense of publicity. Why we need publicity? They asked, and we said clearly why publicity is important for pharmaceutical companies. Then, our objective of proposition, our objective of this motion that we prove and we are still proving is the objective of saving lives. The objective that the opposition is proving now is to save life by prioritizing the enterprise, by prioritizing the company, by prioritizing the main issues of the company. Then we also say that the main earning of pharmaceutical companies are generic drugs, while the other side say that no, they say that are life-threatening condition products. But yes, they give us an example, and we are going to say that it may, as they say, of malaria, it may happen for 1, 2, or 3 years. But when the pharmaceutical company will take advantage, as we clearly said in our example, the pharmaceutical companies take advantage of the necessity of this inelastic demand. Then we also say that the future of we propose and we take into account the future as a better society, as people stop dying. While the other opposition side said that the future is investigation. But let me remind you, as we clearly said, investigation will not stop. Why? Because they are not only on developing countries. They are also right all the whole world. So they are not going to investigate because one country will not need these products. Then we also said that it will increase the economy of the country. Why? Because the people will have a higher standard of living and more money to invest in the same country. They also talk us about the rights of the company to save, but they never talk about the rights of the people to live, the rights of the people to consume these drugs, these inelastic demand drugs. Then they also say that the motivation of the company to decrease their price is, as we understood, was absolutely magic, because the company will be motivated to decrease their price because yes, we didn't have a clear example of that. While we say that in this what we are proposing is to we need to pass a law so as to make these pharmaceutical companies decrease their price. They are not going to be motivated by their own. They also said that companies will die because they are not going to have extraordinary earning in some countries, but we said that they're not only in that country. So it's up to you now if you want to believe on a proposition that believe of saving money and provide a solution, or an opposition that is not providing a solution or a better solution so people stop dying. Thank you very much.